All right, boys and girls. So we're going to talk about genre real quickly. Remember, genre describes a group of stories or a group of text. There are different types of genres that we discuss in fourth grade. Fantasy is a fiction story. It's typically got talking animals, wizards, magic. So some examples of fantasy would include Harry Potter. That's a well-known one, that whole series. But anything with talking animals, magic, dragons, things like that would typically be included in fantasy. Fable is a fiction story that is meant to teach a lesson. So the Tortoise and the Hare is a well-known fable. Fairy tale are fiction stories that have kings, queens, princesses, normally have a happy ending. So Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, your Disney stories are fairy tales. Fiction, a realistic fiction, are stories that have events that could actually happen in real life, even though the story is made up. So Wonder that we read at the beginning of the year, that is a realistic fiction. Anything that is set where it could potentially happen, but it's a made-up story, is a realistic fiction. Historical fiction, fiction that is set on the past, based on events that have actually happened. So, any of the American Girl books are a realistic fiction. Bud Not Buddy, or not realistic fiction, I'm sorry, historical fiction. Bud Not Buddy is also historical fiction. Any stories that are set about Revolutionary War or Civil War. Hamilton is a historical fiction, that musical. Tall tales are fiction stories with lots of exaggeration, and they're normally silly. So Paul Bunyan is a great example of tall tale. John Henry is another example of tall tale. Folk tales are fiction stories with a moral or a lesson, and these stories have been handed down from generation to generation, so by word of mouth. And I can't right now think of a folk tale off the top of my head, but Native American legends, those would be folk tales. Stories that are handed down from one family to the next are folk tales. Now, biographies and autobiographies are both nonfiction, and they're the only nonfictions that I'm discussing right now because they are not fake. They are real stories. Biographies are where the author talks about someone else's life. So if I wrote a book about Barack Obama, that would be a biography. If I wrote a book about Layla Ali, that would be a biography. If I wrote a book about Maggie L. Walker, that would be a biography. An autobiography is a nonfiction story where the author talks about their own life. So if I wrote a book about me, that would be an autobiography. If Barack Obama wrote a book about himself, that would be an autobiography. If Layla Ali wrote a book about herself, that would be an autobiography. And then a myth is a fiction story from ancient Greece with gods and goddesses, its characters, Zeus, Hades, etc. So when we look here and we try to decide what genre these stories are, Harry Potter, like I said, that's a fantasy. Cinderella would be a fairy tale. I Survived, and that's the story of the Titanic. That would be a historical fiction. The Pandas and Chopsticks would be a folk tale handed down from generation to generation. I Am Malala is written by Malala, so it is an autobiography. Ooh. The Tortoise and the Hare would be a fable. Wonder is a realistic fiction. Paul Bunyan is a tall tale. Eleanor Roosevelt, written by somebody else, is a biography. And Gods and Heroes would be a myth. I hope that helps you as you are reviewing genre.